How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Jack Slack, pretending to be Brian Alvarez. It's the 19th of December and Christmas is well on the way. And where the fuck have I been? Well, my computer died, with lots of stuff saved on it, which was due to go up this week, and I got very angry about it. But I'm in a good place now. I'm working on a new computer, or rather I am on a new computer doing the work. So, yeah, that's okay. It's just set me back a few days. And there was much screaming in the Slack household. So we haven't done one of these in 2 weeks now. Well, no, this is the second week. So we missed a week, and now we're doing this. So lots of stuff to talk about. The way we're going to do it this week is we're going to catch up on some news. No matter how long passes, still scraping the barrel for news a lot of the time. And then other weeks we'll have tons of things happen in just a few days. And then we'll do a recap of the event that's just happened, which was Lawler versus RDA. I will gush over Rafael dos Anjos, who I believe is legitimately one of the all-time greats now. And then we'll do some questions, and then we'll do some of because there's nothing going on this weekend, we'll do a recap, or recaps of the fights that stood out to me from last week that I didn't cover but wanted to. So without further ado, let's get into some of the news. Usman versus Meek was finally signed and announced, which is a great fight because you got two big bangers who've been talking about fighting forever, it seems, and now they finally booked it. New The Ultimate Fighter is focusing on undefeateds with guys with at least 5-0 records in order to participate. The one problem with that is that it does move us towards boxing-style matchmaking, where you will have guys pad out their records against schlubs on the regional circuit. And that's always what's been nice about mixed martial arts. You know, you have guys like Alexander Gustafsson and Chris Weidman and people like that coming in, and in their, seventh fight, they'll fight for the world title. And they'll win. It's incredible. And you don't need to baby guys like that. And in boxing, it's been proven you don't need to baby guys like that, because Rigondeaux and Lomachenko, both of whom we'll talk about later, they both jumped into title fights in their third and second fight. Lomachenko in his second, Rigondeaux in his third. But hopefully it's not a trend that will continue. It's just the gimmick selling this series of Tough. If you care about Tough anymore, maybe that will excite you. I mean, if you've gone off Tough like most of the world, I doubt that's going to bring you back in. Bit of a more interesting matchup made. Mark Hunt versus Curtis Blades, set for 221 in Perth. But obviously get Mark Hunt in front of a hometown crowd. They seem to have dropped whatever they were holding against him. Now they have said that he's clear to fight, even though the stuff he was talking about, very clearly he has some kind of pugilistica dementia, or dementia pugilistica. And, I think it was just a very bad look for the UFC, because it was very clear that they were only doing it. I mean, obviously, Hunt had dug himself into a hole by saying those things publicly, but they were clearly only doing it because he is suing them. But at any rate, he went over to the athlete test center, didn't get asked to hit the bag, apparently, didn't get asked to test the units on his punch, but that's what we should do. We should have Francis Ngannou punch Noodles, that fat lad, the kickboxer that took Hunt's body blow with no questions asked, just did it. It was fine. Anyway, the test center apparently cleared him, and now he's back, and they've got him against Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades, he's a guy that I kind of get excited for. It's hard to get excited for anyone at heavyweight. With the exception of Ngannou, I try my hardest for what's his name? Tabura. But there's just not much talent going on up there. But yeah, Curtis Blades' last fight was that weird doctor stoppage against Oleinik, which they were going to disqualify him, and then they realised it probably wasn't worth disqualifying him, but they'd stopped the fight, so they had to give him the TKO. But undefeated except for that fight against Ngannou. And, what I saw in the Ngannou fight, going back over it while I was preparing for Ngannou Overeem, that was the last one, what I saw in the Blades-Ngannou fight was promise, a lot of promise in Curtis Blades. Firstly, he showed how much a jab is going to really bother Francis Ngannou. The only problem was that he's got a good, long, lancing jab, but none of the stuff that makes the jab the safest punch to throw, and the most scientific punch. He'll throw the jab and then immediately stand still and get hit with the counter right, or the follow-up right hand and left hook or whatever, which is exactly how he lost that fight to Ngannou. He was just getting hit after hitting Ngannou. It was the same as Sakuraba versus Wanderlei Silva the third time. Sakuraba's landing punches on him, and then standing there and admiring his work. If you want to be really good with the jab, you've got to, one, make it uncertain when you're going to step in, which is something that he doesn't have. Watch Stipe versus Mark Hunt. Loads of feints, loads of double jabs, loads of half jab into full jab, and just general convincing Hunt that the punch is coming and then it's not, and then the punch isn't coming and it is. But then on the other end of it, you've also got to be able to get down behind your lead shoulder and ride off any right hands, and obviously cover against any left hooks or duck under them. But with a good amount of work, I mean, there's no reason that Blades can't operate the same game plan that Stipe Miocic did against Mark Hunt. Lots of feinting, lots of jabs, setting up the takedown attempts with the jabs, and using fake level changes to keep him off balance and open up his head for jabs too. I don't think that'll happen, however. He's probably going to come out and go straight at Hunt and either eat counter left hooks or just drag him down to the mat on the strength of his wrestling rather than complete mixed martial arts performance. But maybe that's something we should talk about nearer the time, eh? Less exciting matchup, or less exciting for this particular podcaster. Lyoto Machida is coming back to fight Eric Anders somewhere, Belém, his hometown. When the UFC announced this on Twitter, I just asked them, that's your main event, really? But again, he's a local hero. The problem is that Eric Anders, you've never heard of him, I've never heard of him, and there's still a good chance he'll knock out Machida. Machida, firstly, his chin's going. Secondly, he's slowing down. But thirdly, the flaws that are there were there all through his career. And it's now way too late to start learning how to box. Unless Anders is a mark for the body kick out in the open, or very, very aggressive in a misguided sort of way, I can't see Lyoto Machida having an easy time here, or a guaranteed win, which is what you'd hope for in a hometown fight. The big news this week, of course, is that Bellator bobbleheads are now on sale at the Bellator merchandise shop. Guess how much for? $44 each. And if you want them signed, $120. And if you've had a look at them, there's a Fedor Emelianenko one in the sweater, which actually looks good, or the best of them. Maybe it benefits a lot from standing next to the other two. But Randy Couture, who is just... It looks like a bald chemo patient in fight gloves, and in the Bellator stuff that he never ever wore because he never fought in Bellator. And Royce Gracie, which just looks like the Randy Couture one in a gi, or Vladimir Putin. It's so clear that they put time into the Fedor one, and zero effort or time into the Randy and the Royce ones. And these were the ones they were giving out free if you got the first X number of tickets to the event. And they've just changed from Spike to Paramount TV or something like that, haven't they? Or, I don't know, maybe the network's changed names. But I think by the end of the year, they'll be on Pop TV with Impact. The best part was that Scott Coker put out the tweet saying, you've all asked for it. And firstly, there's the creepy Bellator fans who come in at the top going, oh, God, thank you, Scott. You are the best fight promotion. Can you make one of some random female Bellator fighter you've never heard of? And then the more realistic people come in afterwards. People who, like myself, who want to enjoy Bellator, but can't because they spend most of their time being a joke. And they're saying, like, when are you going to be off tape delay? That's what people are asking for. But anyway, that's the Bellator rant done for the week. And then actual big news, Badr Hari is going back to Glory. They announced this on the Glory broadcast. And mixed feelings, always mixed feelings about Badr Hari. He's a phenomenally gifted fighter. I will never not watch him fight. He deserves is an awkward proposition with Badr Hari, which we're going to get onto in a minute. He belongs on the big shows of kickboxing. He doesn't belong fighting, random schlubs in small shows. And after that first fight against Rico Verhoeven, he can absolutely beat Rico Verhoeven. He proved that through the first round and then had his arm snapped. Problem is that he's just a terrible person. He keeps attacking people outside the ring. And as Glory, morally, you probably shouldn't. But then Glory were happy to put in Antonio Silva against Rico Verhoeven. And I'm just happy Rico Verhoeven's getting some actual challenges and not going to murder some ex-MMA fighter. It was getting to the point where I was worried Rico Verhoeven was going to kill someone in the ring. But we'll be talking more about Rico later, because of that Jamal Ben Saddik fight, which was much better than expected. But that's our news for the week. Right, let's get into the recaps. Should we run it from bottom to top? I think we'll run it from bottom to top. So, preliminary, or the Fight Pass prelim, was Jordan Mein versus Eric Silva. And this was sort of the lad everyone thought was the future, who didn't live up to his potential, to the lad who never really got the attention, but didn't live up to his potential. So, it was a matchup of wasters. No, they were... I thought Mein looked good. I think Mein looked a little bit loopy and sloppy in his striking at several points. Would very much like to see him work with some kind of boxing coach that's going to try and get him behind his shoulders. For someone who's so good with elbows and body shots, you would think that he'd be very good at folding behind his elbows and getting down behind his shoulders. But he was very leany and open a lot of the time. However, he did clearly make a conscious effort to get up in Silva's face and actually take the fight to him. If you followed Jordan Mein's career, and when he retired a little while ago, I put together an article on him specifically because nobody seemed to care, but I really liked him. So, one of those pulling rank moments where I was like, I'm going to write this. I don't care if you don't want me to. The theme throughout his career has been moments of brilliance, and just showing these snippets of a very, very good fighter underneath a very conservative fighter who, you can be conservative and have moments of brilliance and win fights. I mean, that's Anderson Silva or Lyoto Machida in a nutshell. But if you're conservative and you aren't making stuff happen, and the other guy's also making stuff happen against you, you're not defensively very good. Or, when you watch Lyoto Machida or Anderson Silva, their counterpunch or their lead is the big moment of the round. And that's, what everyone's focused on. When you watch Jordan Mein, it's almost like you're watching a guy who's built a normal kickboxing game, and then you're just getting 5-10 second snippets of it each round. But again, very good at hitting the body, very good at using his elbows, and he really took it to Eric Silva in this one. I mean, in relative terms to what he normally fights like. It wasn't like Matt Brown taking it to Eric Silva, which has to be one of my favourite performances of all time, because that was Silva pre-USADA, let's just say it. I mean, he's so clearly softened and got much, much worse since USADA came in. But that was pre-USADA Silva, and Matt Brown just got in his face. And the really interesting thing about that fight between Brown and Silva was that the moment that Brown took his foot off the gas, that he wasn't in Eric Silva's face, Silva landed a body kick and hurt him. It was, you have to stay on him, and anytime he is going to throw a kick, you step right down the centre and hit him in the face. Silva is a guy who loves room to work, and then he'll just throw his big strikes, time you, and try and finish you off in bursts. He's very uncomfortable when you get up in his grill. And a lot of his takedown defense and stuff like that seem to rely on being huge and strong, and he's just not as huge and strong anymore at welterweight. So the striking wasn't as interesting as maybe I made it out to be just then. It was still very few good exchange or good combinations, and when Mein capitalized and took him down, it was a lot of sitting in closed guard. There was something very cool I saw that Eric Silva did a couple of times. If you're familiar with the pendulum sweep, it's very basic jiu-jitsu. You catch one wrist, you catch under the other leg, and you pendulum your legs around and swing over in a sweep. And it's kind of hard to hit without the gi. Guys like to hit the arm or very slowly drag the arm across from closed guard, grip across the back, get under the leg. Roger Gracie hits them from time to time. He'll do the arm drag and the other guy will put his leg up to try and stop him taking the back, and then he'll get underneath the leg and pendulum him over. The other variation is the one that the Ribeiro brothers do, which they call the Classico sweep, which is you catch the wrist, normally at the gi, and you open your guard, you put your foot down next to their knee on the floor, and then you're holding the other pant leg and you swing your free leg up and over so that your foot that's on the floor blocks their leg from stepping out. And that's what Silva was doing here without the gi. He was gripping one wrist, he put his foot on the floor next to Mein's leg, and then he'd turn his body and try and kick him with like a leg press motion with his free leg. And he wasn't doing anything with his other arm. It was very weird. But a couple of times he knocked Mein right off balance and almost got up off it. So that's something I'm going to have to play with. This is the stuff that I'm really interested in from guard, because I used to play a lot of gi guard, and you realise that it doesn't really there's so much there that isn't there no-gi, and it's a real pain when you start switching over and you're like, oh, all my favourite triangle setups and sweeps are gone. So I'm always interested in things like what Neil Melanson's doing, where he's finding different ways of getting control over the opponent that aren't just try and break him down. The other moment that really annoyed me in that fight was Eric Silva started shooting a triangle, and it was loose, it was around Mean's head, and Mean was trying to shuck it off. But Silva put his fingers deep in the glove with a cross grip. So he's basically just playing like gi cross guard. And Mario Yamasaki stood up by Silva's head looking at the grip, and he says nothing about it. Really hacks me off when guys put fingers in the gloves. The solution, of course, is just to use the tape to tape the glove to the arm hair, which would be much more painful taking the gloves off. Mind you, half these top grapplers shave themselves all over anyway. Then you had Alessio Chirico. We're going to call him Chirico. The walls of Chirico. Against Oluwale Bangbose, or Bamboshe. Bangbose is what I call him. And he missed an opportunity to call himself the Bang Bus, which would have gotten him so over that people wouldn't care that he's lost 4 out of his last 5. But yeah, that was an awful, awful fight. And they gave Chirico the performance of the night. God, that's outrageous. He did nothing. You just need him when he came in, finally, after 2 rounds of dancing around. Clearly the idea was to conserve Bangbose's energy. He had problems with that in the past, but he did nothing except circle the cage, and he was doing it quite fast, so he was just spending energy jogging around the cage. It was fucking awful. And where was this? Was this Winnipeg? Yeah, it was in Winnipeg, you stupid idiot. The Winnipeg crowd were almost Japanese. I would have been booing a couple of minutes into the first round. They were fairly restrained. Garbage fight, didn't deserve a performance of the night bonus, and I'm going to be ranting about that later because I'm hacked off that RDA didn't get one. So you basically changed it to performance of the night because you were embarrassed about the fact that it was knockout of the night, and you were encouraging brain trauma, or glamorizing it at any rate. And then you gave the performance of the night to the 2 guys who got knockouts, rather than Rafael dos Anjos, who really did put on the performance of the night. Anyway, moving on. John McDasey versus Abel Trujillo didn't really take much notice of this one. I mean, I was watching it, but yeah, it wasn't a lot of great stuff going on that I felt like I needed to talk about or wrote down. Nordine Taleb versus Danny Roberts. Short fight, and Taleb got a fucking performance of the night for it. Oh, it is just knockout of the night. Anyway, head kick through the guard. And that's the other thing about kicking into the open side. It's just the arm. You're not dealing with the back and the shoulder. And the arm has flex. You can kick it right into their head or neck. And Danny Roberts did a really good job against Mike Perry, actually. He was boxing him up for portions of that fight. But yeah, Taleb battered him. Quick finish. Galore Bafando. People were asking me about this guy beforehand because they were like, oh my God, what he did to Charlie Ward. And I was tentative because I know that Charlie Ward's not a very good fighter. But, he was really good. He was exciting. He was explosive and spinny and kept good distance. So it's one of those guys where when you go at him, he's going to make a ton of distance and you're not going to get close to him. And when he wants to get in on you, he can do it on his own terms very easily. And those are the kind of guys. And he was also kind of black explosive, is the technical term. You always have to say that they're explosive if they're a black knockout artist. But he was one of those very explosive guys who cover a lot of distance very quickly and does spinny shit. So people were saying, oh God, if this guy's as good as he looks, I can't imagine that he, wouldn't get very far. And he came out and dropped Chad Laprise immediately, and then Chad Laprise took him down. And you're always waiting to see with these guys, and you go, what could be his weakness? What could be his weakness? And then you go, oh, he got no ground game. Literally no ground game. Had no idea what to do on the bottom. They're saying don't just grip behind. He was holding the guy to him over the back of the head, and his corner is screaming at him, get your frame in, don't just hold him to you. And then Laprise mounts, and he keeps going for the legs up and over, which you can surprise some guys with, but it's not top of your pyramid of escapes in effectiveness, really. And he just got battered from there. So he's a guy who's sort of had like a patchy record in terms of not fighting often enough. It'd be interesting to see him come back from this and grow. But then, looking at how long he takes between fights, and allegedly he was very uninterested in fighting before they brought him in to fight Charlie Ward. He'd sort of gone off the whole business. But, I could see him retiring or just, But then he's at the big league now, and he's got a knockout of the night sort of performance in his history with that Charlie Ward knockout, which you can play forever in highlight reels. So maybe he will come back stronger. There was a distinct flair of Michael Venom Page from him. If he was a London shoot fighting guy, I think Page teaches down there. I need to get down there and train there at some point. And then I'll ask him to his face about his terrible competition. No, like most reporters, I'll just go, God, amazing boxing knockout. Yeah, you could go for a world title after knocking out that homeless man. Julian Marquez versus Darren Stewart. This was one that really confused me. I was watching this, and I was going, oh, well, at least there's some new blood in the heavyweight division. And then I looked at the clock, and they're middleweights. Like, what? They were the biggest, chubbiest, slowest middleweights I'd ever seen. You know when they say, oh, they're moving like featherweights out there? These two middleweights were moving like heavyweights. But, you know, it was a decent enough scrap, back and forward. Darren Stewart just kept trying to take him down. Marquez wanted to knock him out, got the guillotine choke in the end. Fair enough. Jared Cannonier, who I'm always excited for, but is so low output. You know, he slapped around Glover Teixeira on short notice when he was working full-time at an airport. And everyone was like, Glover Teixeira, oh, dangerous banger, the future. Made Chuck Liddell quit, or whatever it was. But yeah, Jan Blachowicz just did a number on him. Made him look silly. But the thing, well, you know, 29-28 decisions, but it wasn't ever like Cannonier was really pushing the pace or doing anything to try and win the fight. But the thing about Blachowicz is that I always sort of underestimate him because his last fight was really bad. It was really ugly. And he came out all right in this fight, but by the third round, both of them were swinging ugly. Yeah, well, I'll talk about the other light heavyweight fight, and then we'll have a rant about the light heavyweight division generally. So Glover Teixeira versus Misha Serkinov. Yeah, not great. Serkinov's doing all right on the feet. Glover Teixeira gets into the mat. Glover Teixeira gets on his back. Serkinov begins punching over his own shoulder at Teixeira's head. Now, there's no one in the world who can make that work. There's literally nothing worse you could be doing at that time. You know, Daniel Cormier was screaming, "Fight the hands," you know, but that's what you do from there. I've never seen anyone hurt someone seriously with a punch over their shoulder. That's like traditional martial arts application of Heian Sandan stuff. You know, it's never worked for anyone ever, and he was doing it, and then eventually he gets TKO'd instead. But just bizarre behaviour from Serkinov. And Glover Teixeira is 40-something now, so if he fights Daniel Cormier for the title, that's a combined age of 80. Just depressing stuff. But Serkinov is part of that group. It's Serkinov, Krylov, or Krylov, whatever you want to call him. Serkinov, Krylov, Liam McGeary, Linton Vassell. These guys who are like the young blood at light heavyweight. And I was so excited for them. But every time they meet someone decent, or, you know, one of these old-timers who's on the way down, they still lose. That division badly needs some new blood. Ponzinnibio versus Mike Perry was, you know, it wasn't a great fight, but they got marked up, which, you know, is always good for the crowd. But as with most times two bangers meet, tends to be the banger who can get to the science a little bit, you know, a little bit more effectively, who takes the fight. Mike Perry is an interesting one because he does some cool things, like the step-up side kick. He was using a step-up inside kick and step-up body kick against Jake Ellenberger, which made me fall in love with him. And then he just didn't show anything clever in his last fight and showed very little clever in this fight. But yeah, like his defense is very wanting. I'm sure he's a big Mike Tyson fan, which is why he calls himself Platinum Mike. But he tries to do these very deep slips to each side. I mean, we're talking about this in the new episode, in the new history lecture, the Customato one. We're talking about what Customato called the tight defense, what the journalists called peekaboo. But those very deep slips to either side. And in MMA, especially if you're doing them that slowly, you're just inviting high kicks, and Ponzinnibio kept trying to catch him leaning, and he caught him with the left hook leaning too. You know, very low hands from Perry and very deep slips, and it was very awkward. Perry did have some success going into the deep slip to his left and then coming up with that, you know, almost, well, a smash, I suppose, a straight uppercut, you know, an uppercut that it goes underhanded out in front of you as opposed to upwards. But that's a peekaboo staple. That's one that Patterson and Torres and Tyson all did very well. Ross Pearson did it very well in MMA. a great punch, and he really rung Ponzinnibio's bell with that one. But yeah, not a terrific fight by any means. And these things tend to not live up to the hype when you get two bangers in there. Ponzinnibio, I think, I was watching through him in the week leading up to this, preparing to do the podcast about him, actually. And what I really got from it was that he would be in real trouble if he fought Martin Kampmann. His head is always straight up in the air after he throws his right hand, and he's right there to be counter-jabbed every time he jabs. So if you got a decent dipping jab, which Kampmann occasionally showed, or if you're great at catching the right hand and returning with the short right straight, which was Kampmann's whole game, you could just give him a nightmare. He's going to be such an easy mark for that sort of strategy. In fact, I was watching his Larkin fight, and that pushed me to do the Boy Watch Larkin, which is out this week, but we'll be plugging that in a moment. Josh Emmett versus Ricardo Lamas, awesome knockout. Not an awful lot led up to it. There wasn't an awful lot of clever stuff going on. Got caught with a left hook while punching. The old Roman Zensov special. While kicking, rather. Surprising knockout. Emmett's clearly got some power, but, I'm not going to start waxing lyrical about his striking ability just yet. And then the main event, which is what I really wanted to talk about today, Rafael dos Anjos versus Robbie Lawler. I thought this was absolutely brilliant. In the pre-fight tactical guide I did at Vice, I talked about low kicks because, it's one of the things that everyone knows about Robbie Lawler. He doesn't check low kicks very well. And of course, Rafael dos Anjos comes out and immediately low kicks him. Talk of knee injuries, but he announced that happened in the third round after he'd been dropped. So he had 15 minutes of domination up to the knee injury. So not too bothered about that. But Dos Anjos really showing how adaptive he is. He's seen as sort of like a meat and potatoes meat and potato striker and good all-rounder, but he's very adaptable. He's been fighting a lot of orthodox fighters lately, and then he fought another southpaw in Robbie Lawler, and he just switched it all around. When he's fighting an orthodox fighter, his left leg is kicking into the open side, so that's his body kick, and he uses the step-up right low kick, as he did against Magny. Against Lawler, left leg goes to the low kick, and he was still using the step-up right kick into the open side for the body kick. So he was still using both kicks, but adjusting them to the correct targets and distancing for each target. Very nice to see. Lawler did start, stepping with his lead knee turned way out in a very exaggerated wide stance once he'd started taking those low kicks, and they really started to take their toll. And that was when Dos Anjos kicked inside and took the leg out, which was really nice. I talked about this in my post-fight piece, but a nice way to think about kicking into targets. It's good to think about kicking into targets rather than which leg is going where. Like, I'm going to throw my right leg to his left, blah, blah, blah. Always kick into the open side for the body, because you're not dealing with the back and shoulders. You're dealing with all the soft stuff, the carapace, which is only guarded by the arms. And the same is true for head kicks. But then when you're talking about low kicks, especially in MMA where guys aren't going to pick them up and check them, you want to be going into the closed side. And I'm talking about this in the new Boy Watch with Lawrence Larkin, which you can watch on this channel. He will switch stances to be on the closed guard with people because he wants to kick into the back of their lead leg, whereas a lot of traditional martial arts kickers like Anthony Pettis will switch stances to be open guard with people so that they're kicking into the open side for the body kicks and the head kicks. But yeah, all brilliant on the feet from there. Showing the 1-2 and weaving off to his left to get under Robbie Lawler's infamous counter right hook. Robbie Lawler did time him later in the game, caught him coming up with a left straight. So there you go. If you're a McGregor fan who desperately wants a reason that McGregor would win, he got caught by one left hand. But generally, Dos Anjos was very good at not giving Lawler the opportunities to hit him too cleanly. His work along the fence was brilliant, as it always is. Again, we're talking about that open and closed side. Against Pettis when he was standing orthodox, and various other orthodox fighters when he was moving towards the fence, wide left, long left hand to the body. Against Lawler, a southpaw, he's using the the lead hook, the right hook into the body very nicely. And there was a nice playoff. Robbie Lawler, he got caught in the double collar tie along the fence at one point and starts digging the short body shots, the little piston punches to the body. And those are the ones that John Jones is using. Those are the ones that, Hammer and Hank Armstrong used way back in the day. Where you've got your head pressed against the opponent so that they're lifted up out of their stance and they can't hit you because they can't turn their body effectively. But Lawler frees his head at one point, opens up with body shots, and because his hands are down by his waist and he's out in the open, he's not pressing into RDA and preventing him from turning. RDA can throw in that short elbow and wobble him. And we talked about this in the article, 2 ways that you can mitigate body shots along the fence, not because you are lowering your hands to hit the body, so that you've not got your guard up, you're not safe. One is keep your head on the guy, keep him forced into the fence or ropes. The other way is to do what RDA was doing throughout this fight, go from distance, throw in a good body shot on the way in, and fall into the clinch, and so that they don't have time to fire back. And RDA was doing one body shot at a time in this fight. He'd go the big right hook to the body, fall into the clinch, start chopping away with knees and elbows. His knees and elbows look great in this fight, better than I've seen them before, probably from all the work he's been doing in with Evolve and his own team and stuff. Really liked it. There was a great moment in, I think it was the 4th round, he's so good at working up and down the body and then going for the takedown. And he'll raise the head with the backwards elbow sometimes from out in the open. He'll come in, he'll lower his lead hand, come up with the backwards Anderson Silva elbow, and then drop on the hips because the elbow stands someone up. It's like the uppercut. We were talking about that last week, or 2 weeks ago rather. The uppercut stands people up, which means you can duck in on them or duck out safe from their attacks. Here he moved in with a body shot, gripped behind the head, held the wrist, freed the hand that was on the wrist, and upward elbowed Robbie Lawler in the face, stood him up, ducked down on his hips, took him down. Beautiful stuff. And then Robbie Lawler, along the fence, in that laying it out position, one guy's pulling out the legs, pulling out the hooks with his feet, but pressing into the fence, and the other guy's just holding around the waist. That was where Johnny Hendricks desperately held on to Lawler to stall for time. In this fight, it was where Lawler was holding on, and RDA, who was in the Hendricks position, was like, please restart the fight, I don't like this takedown that I've taken. It was really funny. But by the 5th round, Lawler's legs were shot. He was standing along the fence waiting for RDA to come to him, and RDA would keep perfect distance, not get swung at, step in, bang to the body, bang to the head, chop in the elbows, step out again, and do it all over again. Really gorgeous performance from RDA. And, 5th round Lawler didn't come. The hammer went for 10 seconds, and RDA put his hands up, and Lawler just looked at him. So he very much broke Lawler's will in that fight, and the injury certainly wouldn't have helped. But everything RDA did in that fight was amazing. He is brilliant. He's an all-time great already. I mean, his run at lightweight is almost unparalleled. Even if it's only one title defense, the guys he beat are so much better than any other streak you can point to in that division. And now he can do it against legit welterweights. I mean, the injury and people claiming that Robbie Lawler's done, that means that you can keep claiming that RDA is not really a welterweight. But at this point, I mean, he's beaten 3 welterweights. They can't all be washed up. So he's well within his rights to start campaigning for that title shot. And he's certainly more interesting as a fighter than Colby Covington, whichever one is correct. But yeah, great fight, can't complain. Really good main event. Toughness of Robbie Lawler on full display. Actually, the only thing I would say about Rafael Dos Anjos' performance is that I really didn't like that long flurry. I mean, he did dig in some body shots throughout, but he was throwing a lot of punches and not really getting Lawler clean. And he spent the rest of the next round on the fence because he was fairly arm weary, and that was where Lawler put him. But yeah, otherwise, brilliant performance. Right, quick plug, and then we'll do some questions. If you aren't a Patreon boy, consider becoming a Patreon boy. Sign up, and the history lectures are available to you, which are on the Fight Primer. Normally, I try and put some additional material in with them so that you can look at that while I'm talking. The new one is Customato and Floyd Patterson, or rather Floyd Patterson and Customato. That's the thing. He started to overshadow him. It's about paranoia. It's about being an unlikely champion. It's about coming back from embarrassment and failure. And it's the start of the era of Ali, which is something that we will do in more depth than everything else. Which is something that I'm going to try and divide into a few parts when we get round to it. If you haven't bookmarked thefightprimer.com, go do it. If you haven't bought Notorious, amazing Christmas present. And if you want to send your questions for next week's Fights Gone By podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. Dear Jack, love your work. I've been playing lots of Tekken 7 as King, whose motion capture was done by Minoru Suzuki, and noticed he had a jump spinning back kick. There are other Japanese pro wrestlers who also like the jump spinning back kick, such as Tiger Mask and Yuko Miyato. I originally thought this was for show until I saw Benny the Jet and David Lusso do it. What are the advantages/disadvantages of using a jump spinning back kick as opposed to a grounded spinning back kick? Cheers, from Samson. P.S. I've attached an image of young Suzuki doing the motion capture for Tekken. Right, this was the coolest thing I've seen in a while. I did not know Minoru Suzuki was involved with Tekken, and it was the first iteration of Tekken, apparently, because these photos of Minoru Suzuki dressed up doing motion capture are very young Minoru Suzuki. If you don't know, I love Minoru Suzuki, but then if you've been following this podcast for any length of time, I'll have brought him up at some point. Fantastic catch wrestler, basically, one of the very few who can really be called a catch wrestler in MMA. And through his early run, he really was something special. And a lot of the stuff that he did, like shin on the neck rides and things like that to set up Kimuras, coming back in. You see Habib using it, and Gordon Ryan was using it against Halleck Gracie just this weekend. Or last weekend, or whatever that was. But no, I had no idea he was involved with Tekken, or, King. And it's pretty cool that he was King, because I always used to play King. They may well have re-motion captured since then. It has been however many years, 20 years, something like that, since the first Tekken. But awesome nonetheless. But anyway, on to jumping back kicks. The jumping back kick is... I can't remember where I talked about this. It might have been in Fighting Karate. It might have been in something else. But the jumping back kick is an elaborate counter-strike. I know where I talked about this extensively. I put up a video on my channel called Raymond Daniels Jump Kicks and Corners or something like that. But it's about Raymond Daniels. It's one of the most popular videos on my channel. But Raymond Daniels does a lot of jumping back kicks too. And the thing about a jumping back kick is you don't have a pivot leg. You are pulling that up into you as you jump. So while it's not necessarily as stable, and if you're covering any distance, you're really launching yourself at the guy. So the idea is very rarely to cover distance with a jumping back kick. But you can whip around very, very quickly. The jumping back kick is almost always a counter strike. And an intercepting counter strike. It's not like you slip a punch and then you jump for the back kick. The jump back kick is a counter to the opponent's forward motion. So we're thinking like keep distance, allow the opponent to take 2 steps in, make them think that you're going to run every time you go. And then, where you would put in the intercepting knee or the reverse punch down the center, the jumping back kick works there. Couple of nice examples. Anthony Pettis hit one, a very, very quick low one against Gilbert Melendez, where Melendez was just pushing in on him, constantly trying to put him on the fence. Raymond Daniels has hit tons of them. And as he said, David Lusso. Really, the thing about the back kick generally is that you've got to try and get your foot down almost across yourself without the opponent realizing that you're going to spin. When we're watching fights, Joe Rogan, Mike Goldberg, whoever is on commentary will go, "Oh, it looks like he's thinking about spinning," because you can see, and the opponent can see you going bladed too. So where we talk about like jabbing, if you start doing like a very traditional jab that's sort of side on, something else we were talking about in the Customato episode, because he had very square on fighters and they jump to get to side on to do the body jab. But if you step in so that you're almost on a line in like the horse stance style, that's how you hide a spin for like a stepping back kick. Kung Lee used to do a rear straight step through and change stance to back kick. But the jumping back kick is one which largely relies on the opponent coming on to you. And you have to jump, obviously, with enough force that you're not just going to get knocked out of the air or bounce off them when you kick. And, of course, you're losing a little bit of power because you're not kicking off the planted foot. You don't have any traction on the ground. But it's a personal favourite. I've been using this one for years, from my karate days, and I love it. Well worth a go. I mean, if you're into intercepting counters, which I am, and if you train any karate or point fighting or anything like that, you'll be into them. You'll find them a lot easier. Well worth a go. You can do a jumping back kick or a jumping turning side kick. It doesn't really matter if you're chambering the leg high or if you're, putting it straight back behind you, like knee towards the floor, in the style of a mule kick. As long as you're jumping high enough, both will do. You really don't have much risk of catching them low, which is one of the risks of a back kick as opposed to a turning side kick. But I still can't get over how cool that is about Minoru Suzuki. Cheers, Samson. Hi Jack, how's it going? The podcast is as good as it's always been. I love it. Keep up the great work, mate. Aw, the butter. Who do you think are Tough's, the Ultimate Fighter's, greatest surprises and disappointments? Anyone who popped up on your eyes for better or worse? Connor Bless from Ingo. Well, I drop in and out of Tough. I really don't enjoy it that much. Okay, it's really if I'm starved for fights, or for some reason I've just got a real hankering for extra fights and I don't want to go to any of the number of other MMA and kickboxing promotions that there are out there. But Kelvin Gastelum stands out because everyone was talking about what a world beater he was, like the next Cain Velasquez, and I really wasn't impressed at all. And then since getting off the Ultimate Fighter and being able to train full time and as a professional fighter, he's come on in leaps and bounds. You would never expect the hands and just all around game now from the chubby dude who basically only really had an arm roll, which is not a great move for MMA typically. So yeah, he was a surprise. I mean, I knew Ryan Hall would be a big deal, but I'm glad that he surprised so many people too. I desperately hope he gets back in the cage soon. But yeah, for the most part, I don't really bother with Tough. Can't be much help there. Sorry, Ingo. Right, before we wrap up, I thought we'd talk about some of the fights that happened in the interim and that I just wanted to touch on. Swanson versus Ortega. Swanson looked decent. I'm really surprised at how Ortega's striking has come along because I remember him as the cornroad, basically jiu-jitsu savant who didn't do much else and failed the drug test, but T-City. But no, he looked really good. His punches, his form was good. It was crisp. He was timing the strikes well, and he's a very long guy at that weight class too. He looked like a weight class bigger than Swanson. His snap downs were really interesting. He did a weird sort of body lock, but over Swanson's shoulder on one side, and then he passed him straight under for the guillotine attempt, or front headlock rather. Really useful if you're a tall guy to go for snap downs, but you saw the Rafaconda come in. You're seeing a lot of guys playing around with the Anaconda generally. It used to be very much a one-trick technique. You had to get it from the front of the sprawl, and guys would know it was coming because it was really obvious what you were doing when you were digging your hand that deep. It was easier to try and get a go behind or try and break him down onto the DARS. But the Anaconda's really come along in recent years. 2009, I think it was, Rafa Mendez ran through ADCC, and he was attempting this all the time, a rolling Anaconda choke from within his opponent's half guard. So he's in top position in half guard, and he'd catch their head, get the hand really deep under their armpit, and then he'd roll over them, freeing his legs, and lock up the grip. And then this is how this connects to the Ortega thing. He would bring his legs back over his head as they're both looking at the ceiling in like a north-south looking, well, not north-south, north-north, I suppose, but head-to-head looking upwards. He'd bring his legs back over as if he was trying to mount the guy and use his leg to pull their elbow across and tighten the choke. And you saw Ortega trying to do that and Swanson desperately trying to keep his arm free. Another interesting development in the Anaconda world, it's not a very big one, but it's still a world. Neil Melanson does a very interesting guillotine, pulling the shin guard or whatever they call it off the arm in guillotine and using it to roll the opponent onto their side and then shooting the elbow straight through into the Anaconda, which Chaz Skelly picked up the fastest submission in UFC history with against Maximo Blanco. But they all really work on the same sort of like trying to catch Anaconda chokes while in transition rather than trying to force it down someone's throat during a sprawl. So it was really interesting seeing him go for it. I think it was twice against Swanson here. So really impressed by Ortega. Very excited. I'm going to go back and watch some of his fights now because he's another one where I've been watching his fights, but because I've not been like super excited for them, they've been going in the background and I've been like, tweeting about whatever fight I'm really looking forward to. Yes, that was great. Moraes versus Aljo, worth a mention. I thought Moraes looked good. I've heard, I think it was Patrick Wyman said this, that he seems to be like trying to rush through his contract and renegotiate. And certainly that performance will help him because the last two, I mean, he's been decent enough. He's not looked like out of his depth at any point. But he hasn't like come in as the outside champion and smashed everyone, which is kind of, you shouldn't expect it, but people still do, and it kind of disappoints. But yeah, knee to the head while I think Mariah said he was aiming for a low kick. It reminded me a lot of Joachim Hansen versus Luis Azeredo. He was trying to, I think, body kick him, and Luis Azeredo ducked onto the knee, which is weird because Hansen is famous for catching guys with knees as they duck down on purpose, and this one was accidental. And the other one, Ryan Bader versus Ilir Latifi. He looked like he was trying to kick him, and then he accidentally kneed him in the head as he dived in. Another fight that I actually really enjoyed, Rico Verhoeven versus Jamal Ben Saddik. And I want to apologise to Jamal Ben Saddik for writing him off, because I saw him against Ayats and he looked rubbish. He was just a big fat guy who swung. And he came into this fight in really good shape. And also I found out that he's had two go-arounds with cancer. I think it was thyroid cancer, which is just horrible. But all that since he started his career. So he said that his coaches said he's in the best shape of his career. Had the not easiest camp, but no outside distractions for his camp and stuff like that. And it really showed. I mean, he wasn't terrifically varied, but he was waiting for Rico to low kick or to step in, and he'd try and catch him on one leg with the right hand, and it worked a lot for the first 3 rounds. It was when Rico sort of bit down on his gum shield and started boxing, because Rico's got a very good jab, and when he started boxing, he did a lot better, and eventually tired Saddik and caught him with a high kick. But I was very impressed by Jamal Ben Saddik, and of course impressed by Rico, but I always am. But this was the first time in a while since the Badr fight that I felt like, this guy really belonged in there with Rico. And, the Badr fight was kind of tarnished by the fact that Badr worked him over for the first round and then freak arm injury and he gave up in the second. And then finally, Lomachenko versus Rigondeaux, on the subject of giving up. Someone who didn't have a broken arm. God, the first thing he should have done, Rigondeaux, after this fight was just find an image on Google of a broken wrist X-ray and put it out, because now everyone's calling him a quitter, and he was finding it hard to get fights originally before this. Now he's just going to be, he's not undefeated, so you don't get that rub if you beat him. You're not going to be the only guy on his record to beat him, and he's also a really hard fight who doesn't draw any fans. He was fighting in a leisure centre in Cardiff until recently. Oh no, it was an ice rink in Cardiff with a capacity crowd of 3,000. But yeah, it was what we talked about in the pre-fight, double jab Rigondeaux into that deep duck, the same as with Mayweather. Get him into his duck first, make sure he can't move back and that he's trapped with his head down, and then start firing on him. And you saw him coming up into the clinch, and this is the problem with boxing, professional boxing. These guys are both very experienced amateurs. In the amateur game, your head goes below the belt line, you get warned. And in the amateur game, they're keen to disqualify you as soon as possible. But in the pro game, you can dip your head below the belt line all you want. So you duck down really deep to the back, and then as the opponent gets in on top of you trying to line up their rear hand, you just weave in on their hips and come up as if you're trying to take them down. With a lifting up double leg pickup rather. But yeah, it's really annoying that keeps working. So Lomachenko did drop his weight on the back of his head a few times, which was something that we talked about, and he also just double jabbed him and he'd start opening up from on top of him, which was nice. Rigondeaux did go to his single collar tie uppercuts, which are his real hurting punch. It's a foul, but he really does get guys with that. And Lomachenko, by the 6th round, he was really putting it on him. It's a shame Rigondeaux basically spoiled the performance the only way he could. He wasn't getting back into it, so he just gave up, which takes a lot of the rub off Lomachenko in the eyes of the public, which is a damn shame. Anyway, I think we've gone on long enough today. I'm sorry for my absence last week. I have my computer back, a new computer, which I can actually do things on. I was working on an old banger, which was, I think it was 2 gig of RAM, and I'd open up an Adobe program, and everything would just shudder to a halt. And now I can actually open up different Adobe windows at the same time. It's amazing. So expect lots more competent video editing in future and stuff like that, I hope. And I'm still working out the settings on the microphone on this one, but we'll get there. Thanks for your patience, and I'll catch you next week. Cheers.